I can make you walk again. The millionaire laughed until an amazing transformation was revealed. Jacob Fletcher sat in the back of the dimly lit diner, the air heavy with the scent of burnt coffee and grease. He scoffed at the woman speaking passionately at the front of the room, the small townsfolk staring at her as if she were a wild animal. Rehabilitation center? He chuckled, his voice laced with sarcasm. For veterans? Please. I can't even fathom the expense. Memories of his former life, nestled in the corners of his sprawling estate, looped through his mind: fine suits, boardrooms buzzing with accolades, the unmistakable rush of power and respect. Now, the echo of his laughter only magnified the weight of disdain aimed at him. The whispers of gossip hovered in his peripheral vision like invisible chains binding him to past mistakes. As Lydia finished her argument, articulating the need for community and care, Jacob felt a flicker of resentment mixed with something else, something unsettling. Here she was, a passionate physical therapist, dedicated to lifting those who had fallen, and here he was, reduced to the specter of a once venerated businessman. The scalding disappointment from his father burned against the backdrop of this moment. He had it all, yet lost everything in a matter of weeks due to a scandal seen as betrayal, dashed hopes tossed aside like yesterday's news. Now, the shame engulfed him, igniting a deep-seated panic he could no longer ignore. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Moments later, sipping whiskey at a rundown bar, he encountered a former soldier, a man hardened by life yet radiant with resilience. Their conversation burrowed under his skin like a splinter. Every story of sacrifice echoed the hollow failures in Jacob's chest. How could this man have endured so much pain, yet smile through adversity? It felt unfair. Jacob should have been the one with the accolades. The awards that lined his walls were mere ghosts of days gone by, mocking him with their presence. Here he sat, drowning in self-pity while someone else had painfully learned how to live again. And when Lydia's face flashed in his mind, with her fiery determination, Jacob's heart wrestled with a jarring realization: was his own wealth ever meant to elevate him, or had it simply masked his own moral blindness? Reading the letter from his estranged mother had felt like a cruel joke, revealing hidden family values opposing everything he had ever believed. Did he really want to remain imprisoned in the safety of his privilege? His jaw tightened, muscles winding into knots. Could he turn towards a new path? Or would he cling to the remnants of a tarnished legacy? As dusk swallowed the horizon, bathed in deep hues of orange and crimson, Jacob stared down a treacherous path, one that would demand change and confrontation. The weight of his mistakes pressed against his chest like a vice, suffocating yet liberating. Fear and desperation warred within him, creating a tempest of indecision. Lydia was out of his league, and yet, he felt an undeniable pull. An instinct that told him that walking away from the past could mean finding something worthwhile in the ashes. He was on the brink, staring into the abyss of what it meant to truly recover, to rise again. Would he step toward the light or retreat into the shadows? The moment of truth was nearing, and the struggle had only just begun. The whiskey burned as it slid down Jacob's throat, a raw reminder of the man he had become amidst the debris of his former life. He leaned back against the sticky vinyl booth, closing his eyes to shut out the memories of boardroom battles and echoing applause, instead focusing on the jagged aftertaste left by regret. What had once fueled his ambitions now felt more like a noose tightening around his neck. Each gulp served as both a comfort and a chastisement, forcing him to confront the growing divide between who he thought he was and who he truly needed to become. The soldier at the bar gave a hearty laugh, recounting another story about his time in service. It rumbled through the dim bar like thunder, and Jacob's mind drifted. He only half listened. The man's tales spoke of honor and integrity, qualities that felt foreign to Jacob. In that moment, sitting under the flickering neon sign, Jacob realized how deeply he wanted to be inspired, yet felt trapped by the shadows of his past choices. Could he truly reshape himself? Could he learn to walk again figuratively and literally without the support of his wealth? Recognizing the heavy weight on his shoulders, Jacob reached for his phone, unsteady hands trembling slightly as he navigated to Lydia's rehabilitative practice online. The images of her working with clients ignited a flicker of something within him, a blend of admiration and envy. Each patient, each victory celebrated spoke to a resilience he had long abandoned. He hesitated before tapping schedule a consultation. Would she be willing to engage with someone so deeply flawed? The thought of rejection gnawed at his core. The cursor blinked on the screen like a heartbeat, and with a swift inhalation, he pressed the button. As the confirmation flashed, he felt the first stirrings of hope, but it was quickly followed by doubt. What if he could not face her? What if he faltered? Hours passed, and the bar grew quieter. Jacob's buzz had faded, clarity giving way to trepidation. He knew facing Lydia and accepting help would force him to peel back layers of pride accumulated over years of entitlement. Would he walk in there and admit he was lost? Was it time to strip away the facade of the invincible millionaire and let the world see the man beneath, a man in need of support? With a determined sigh, Jacob left the bar, stepping outside into the cool night air that felt refreshing against his regret-laden skin. He wandered toward the riverbank, a place he used to find solace in solitude. The water glistened in the moonlight, tossing reflections around like fleeting memories. Each wave lapping at the shore reminded him of the struggles he faced. Silence wrapped around him, a cocoon of introspection that beckoned him to dig deeper into himself. Suddenly, the peace was interrupted by a commotion on the other side of the river. A group of people gathered, their voices animated, overshadowing the serenity of the night. Intrigued and unable to resist, Jacob moved closer. Walking along the bank, he felt the adrenaline surge through him as he approached. What is happening? As he peered through the gathered crowd, he witnessed a confrontation, a man shouting at someone who appeared to be in distress. The scene unfolded like a painful mirror of his own life, chaos spilling forth as he became an unexpected witness to vulnerability and tension. His heart raced. Here in front of him was a defining moment, a chance to intervene. Did he have the courage to step in and offer help, even at the risk of being rejected himself? For Jacob, it felt as if the universe had conspired to present a choice, to step backward into denial or forward into the unknown tide of change. The decision loomed, teetering on the edge of possibility. The time had come to face a new narrative and embrace the raw consequences of his actions. His stomach churned, not from the whiskey but from the weight of indecision pressing down on him. He had spent so long living in the shadows of his ego, wrapped in the comfort of detachment, that the notion of involvement, of risking himself for another, felt foreign. Yet, as the shout rang out again, sharper and more desperate, a flicker ignited within him, urging him to act. The atmosphere thickened with tension. Jacob's gaze settled on the distressed figure, a young woman crouched low, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. The man's raging anger seemed misplaced, fueled perhaps by bottled frustrations rather than any real grievance. This wasn't merely a stranger's plight, this mirrored the chaos he knew too well, a reflection of his own turmoil. It hit him hard, the realization that the very essence of humanity he thought he had lost still beckoned him to respond. With every instinct screaming at him to retreat, Jacob stepped forward, driven by something he couldn't quite articulate. Could he actually intervene, or would fear win? The crowd was fixated on the confrontation, their murmurs like a chorus of ghosts, reminding him of moments he had witnessed but ignored. The adrenaline surged, almost intoxicating in its clarity. He had been an onlooker for far too long. It was time to reclaim a sense of purpose, however risky. Hey! Back off! Jacob's voice came out stronger than he intended, surprising even himself. The man turned, eyes narrowing at this unexpected disruption. For a fleeting moment, Jacob held the man's gaze, silently questioning whether he had crossed an invisible line. But there was a flicker of surprise followed by anger in the man's expression, and Jacob's heart raced. Who the hell are you? The man barked, stepping closer, addressing Jacob, his posture radiating hostility. Just someone who thinks you're making a terrible mistake. Jacob took a measured breath, planted his feet firmly on the ground. Something inside him began to coalesce, a determination he hadn't felt in years. The need to protect, to support, to engage had awakened a dormant spirit. Mind your own business. The man's words were venomous, but Jacob didn't waver. The tension was palpable, the air thick with uncertainty, but a strange sense of peace began to filter through the chaos. He realized that this confrontation was more than just about the woman, it was about him, too. Every word he spoke echoed his internal battle, a declaration that he was no longer willing to hide in the shadows of his own life. Maybe I can help, Jacob continued, focusing on the woman instead of the confrontational man beside her. Are you okay? His tone softened, empathy breaking through the defensive barriers he had built. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, he felt a connection building, a silent understanding that shared suffering could be transformed into mutual strength. The woman looked up, uncertainty lacing her features, but there was something in his gaze, an invitation to hope. In that moment, Jacob became acutely aware of his own uncertainty. He wasn't just helping her, he was helping himself. None of this made sense. He had fought battles in the boardrooms and won from a position of power, but how did one win in the arena of everyday life? How did he rise beyond the man who had only known how to wield wealth? The man who had been threatening the young woman glared at Jacob, his bravado wavering. The crowd murmured, doubt blooming in the air. With each heartbeat, Jacob felt an involuntary resolve solidifying. This was not just an act of bravery, it was the dawn of a transformation. The man shot one more contemptuous glance at Jacob before hesitating, as if deciding how to respond. The very uncertainty that had engulfed Jacob was now reflected back to him, setting off a strange chain reaction of realization. He could become the man who intervenes, not just for others but for himself. A line had been crossed, but it had forged a new beginning. As Jacob scanned the faces of the crowd, he realized he was standing at a threshold, and the path ahead was as intimidating as it was inviting. Whether the man backed down or lashed out, Jacob had already committed to a new narrative. He would be the architect of his own destiny, even if it meant embracing vulnerability, but before he could fully appreciate this newfound conviction, a shout pierced through the night, shattering his moment of clarity entirely. Instinctively, Jacob turned, his heart pounding with premonition. What now? The silence shifted, tension changed form, and in the realization that this night was far from over, he felt something dark loom ahead. Jacob's heart raced. The shout echoed through the air, provoking a roiling seasickness of uncertainty. Tension clung to him, cold and clammy, like the sweat drenching his palms. He forced himself to turn back to the confrontation, where the man's indecision had momentarily given way to rage. The young woman remained crouched, quivering as if the very ground beneath her might swallow her whole. In that tense moment, Jacob's instincts kicked in. He could either back down, retreating into the old familiar zones where he had felt safe and invisible, or he could plunge deeper into the unknown, confronting not just the situation before him, but everything that had kept him stagnant for years. Come out of this, he whispered to himself, be the person you want to be. His voice rang in his ears, almost drowning out the jeers from the onlookers. It was no longer just her safety that mattered, it was his own burgeoning sense of self-worth that hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of intervention. Taking a slow, steady breath, Jacob stepped further into the fray. This isn't what you want. There's no real fight to be had here, he said, projecting his voice with newfound strength. The aggressor narrowed his eyes at Jacob, fists clenched. What do you know about what I want? He spat, shifting his position like a predator sizing up an opponent. Panic rushed through Jacob's veins, but alongside it flowed determination. I know this isn't you. I know people make mistakes sometimes without even realizing it, Jacob countered, his voice steadying as he embraced the discomfort. I've made plenty. But it's never too late to change course. Consider stepping back. A fleeting moment passed, silence hanging thick in the air. Around them, the crowd seemed to collectively pause, breath held. It was Jacob's hope that his words would pierce through the layers of anger, perhaps igniting a spark within that the man had buried long ago. The aggressor hesitated, brow contracting in confusion, his fierce exterior cracking slightly. Perhaps, Jacob thought, a flicker of understanding began to blossom in those stormy eyes. "Shut up," the man barked, but there was a tremor in his voice, a hint that he was battling more than just Jacob's words. Jacob seized the opening. "I get it. Life is rough. Things happen, things that humiliate us, frustrate us. But this isn't the answer." His voice softened, appealing to something deeply human. "You're better than this. We all are." With each sentence, the adrenaline amplified within Jacob, but so did a budding self-acceptance. He realized he had confronted far greater opponents within himself throughout his life: depression, regret, and the question of his own worth. Today, he wasn't just fighting for the woman, he was fighting for every fractured piece of himself. Suddenly, the shout from before echoed again, this time sharper and more urgent. The distraction sent shocks through Jacob's focus. Instinctively, he turned, heart pounding. The crowd muttered this time, an anxious anticipation replaced the earlier indifference. What Jacob started, looking to find the source of distress. That's when he spotted a figure, rushing towards them through the crowd. A man, clad in a dark hoodie, his face partially hidden, pushed forward with a determination that sent goosebumps down Jacob's spine. "Step away from her," the newcomer shouted, his tone commanding and full of authority. Jacob's chest tightened. Not only was he faced with the physical confrontation before him, but now he felt a threatening presence that stirred deeper fears within, a fear that even his newfound resolve might not be enough. Would he be able to protect the woman? Would he find the strength to confront this next layer of chaos? Faced with this rapidly escalating situation, Jacob realized that the choice he had made was only the beginning of a much more complicated series of choices laid out before him. Standing at the precipice of a new reality, Jacob braced himself, caught in the whirlwind of impending turmoil. The determination ignited in him was now tempered with the anxiety of something sinister lurking just beneath the surface. The time had come, he realized, to face the unknown head-on. Whatever awaited him on the other side would define not just this night, but the man he was destined to become. The tension in the air thickened like a miasma, as if the very universe had conspired to halt their frantic world. Jacob stood resolute, feeling the walls of his anxiety begin to crumble under the weight of his conviction. There was no retreating now, the stakes had escalated beyond mere safety. This was a crucible forging a new version of himself in real time. As the man in the hoodie advanced, Jacob's mind raced. Who was this newcomer? Did he pose another threat, or was he an ally? Subtle shifts in the crowd indicated that people were beginning to side with one narrative or another, a dynamic that was suddenly charged with unpredictability. Jacob's heart thundered in his chest, matching the urgency of the scene. "Stay back," the hooded man barked, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Jacob sensed a pulse of authority radiating from him, a visceral force that might draw attention away from the young woman. But there was another layer beneath the surface, a glint of desperation. "Please," Jacob entreated the hoodie-clad figure, his voice firm but measured, "let's just talk this through. Violence isn't the answer for anyone involved." The man's gaze flickered as he shifted focus between Jacob and the aggressor. Instinctively, Jacob sensed that the new arrival had more than just anger at play, there was a deeper hurt etched in his furrowed brow. Each second felt stretched thin, every breath becoming a slow-motion ordeal. "It's too late for words," the hooded man retorted, a tremble in his voice revealing his inner conflict. Jacob seized upon that vulnerability, bolstering the flickers of connection forming between them. "I used to think that, too. That fighting was the only way to be strong," Jacob responded, confronting his own mirror with every word. "But right now, I promise you, standing down takes more strength than any punch ever could." The aggressor, still caught between bluster and uncertainty, held his ground, fists tightened around the possibility of violence. "Ain't nobody got to take your side, boy," he sneered, but there was a faltering edge in his bravado, which prompted Jacob to dig deeper. "How do you want this to end?" Jacob fired back, his voice low but strong. "Do you want a fight today, or do you want a chance for something better tomorrow? I know what it feels like to feel backed into a corner and lash out. But we can choose something else." In that moment, a visceral realization sharpened Jacob's focus. This confrontation wasn't just a pivotal point for those physically present, but a reflection of the battles raging internally within each person involved. It was a chance for reconciliation, not only for the young woman but also for him, for the hooded figure, and even for the angry man before him. The crowd began to shift nervously, whispering amongst themselves. Jacob sensed their skepticism, but also the thin, tentative current of hope and energy that bred possibility. He took a step closer, drawing upon the connection that was burgeoning in the charged atmosphere. "Let us find a different way out of this together. You don't have to fight when you can choose dialogue," Jacob implored, aiming to bridge the emotional gap that lay between them. For a fleeting moment, Jacob could see confusion ripple across the aggressor's face, as if some internal debate sparked to life. But just as quickly, the man's fists tensed even more, his stance hardened like an impenetrable wall. Jacob's heart sank. He needed something more. Suddenly, the man in the hoodie clenched his jaw, determination flashing in his eyes. "No more fighting," he bellowed, stepping forward defiantly, his hands raised in a non-threatening manner. The impact of those words rang loudly in Jacob's mind. A seismic shift had occurred. Here stood a man, just as lost as he had been, ready to reclaim his narrative. This moment was not only a gathering storm, it was also the nexus of transformation. As tension crackled like electricity in the air, the crowd began to shift. Eyes darted between Jacob, the confronted man, and the hooded figure. Would this tumultuous moment serve as a springboard into change, or would it fracture everything they glimpsed? Jacob's mind raced with the urgency of the decision available to all of them, teetering on the brink of a larger revelation. He had taken a stand, but now, what awaited him next could redefine everything he thought he understood about confrontations, fear, and change. In that charged silence, what would each of them ultimately choose? As the stillness hung ominously, Jacob felt the fabric of his reality begin unraveling, revealing the tapestry of choices that wound toward an uncertain destiny. What lay ahead promised to blur the lines between fear and courage, forcing Jacob to decide once and for all what kind of man he truly wanted to become. As silence enveloped the space, Jacob could feel the weight of everyone's gaze settling on him, a burden he wasn't sure he was ready to bear. The air crackled with anticipation, expectation that could turn to chaos with the slightest provocation. The hooded man and the aggressor stood at the heart of this fraying tension, but Jacob found himself as the tether pulling them back from the brink. The aggressor was a study in conflict, his features a mask of stark defiance and vulnerability. Fear and aggression churned within him, and Jacob realized that this was not just a man threatening others, he was grappling with his own demons, his choices closing in like the walls of a prison. This was a pivotal moment not only for him but for Jacob as a conduit of understanding. "Look, I know you're scared," Jacob continued, his voice steady but forceful. "We all are. But nothing good comes from this. You want to fight, but what are you really hoping to achieve?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice, sensing the crowd straining to hear as if his words might fracture the veil of hostility. "When was the last time you felt powerful without needing to instill fear in others?" The aggressor hesitated, confusion blinking in his eyes like a flickering bulb. For a heartbeat, Jacob thought he might see recognition there, a glimmer of empathy sparking to life. "Your strength doesn't come from intimidation, it comes from knowing when to take a step back. I'm asking you to be brave in a way you've never considered," he pressed, daring to push against the barrier of the man's pain. Across from him, the hooded man took a half step forward, his fists still clenched at his sides. "Don't let this guy cloud your judgment," he said, injecting a hint of urgency into his tone. "There's a way out that doesn't involve fists." Jacob felt an internal tug of war brewing. He had battled similar thoughts for years, the notion of strength wrapped tightly around aggression and bravado. It was a clarity born not just of conjecture but of raw experience. Maybe it's time to redefine what strength can be, Jacob continued, channeling his own moments of vulnerability. You're standing here because something inside you longs for more than this. You feel it, don't you? He caught the aggressor's eyes directly, willing him to engage beneath the surface. The crowd shifted again, this time in tandem with Jacob's renewed resolve. He could feel their unease morph into empathy as they witnessed not just a confrontation but a transformation, one that required people to dig deeper within themselves. What happens next? The aggressor finally asked, the fight slipping from his stance as doubt seeped in. That's up to you, Jacob replied, mirroring the aggressive stance with an open posture that exuded calm. But we've seen where anger leads, haven't we? There's a choice here in front of you, a risky one, but one that could lead to freedom instead of conflict. As he spoke those words, the crowd seemed to pulse with a collective breath, their energy shifting once more, a singular force that coalesced around the idea of potential change. In that moment, Jacob started to understand himself more profoundly than ever before. He wasn't merely an observer in this escalating scene, he was an agent of transformation. Fear still buzzed in his veins, but it began to melt away, leaving clarity in its wake, one that urged him to stay vulnerable, to choose dialogue over conflict. Then, unexpectedly, the hooded man broke the simmering tension. Let's take a step back and talk this out. We all have stories, he said, his voice breaking the barrier of hostility. We can either become the villains in our own narratives or the heroes who change their arcs. Jacob observed as the aggressor's expression shifted, slowly cracking under the pressure of honesty. Moments passed, but inside Jacob, something shifted. He felt the potential for empathy's surge catalyzing his own development. But just as he thought the moment was salvaging itself, a loud shout cut through the stillness from the back of the crowd, startling everyone. What's going on here? Are you all just going to stand there? The voice belonged to someone Jacob recognized from his past, a person well acquainted with his own vulnerabilities and his failures. Now, with the stakes higher than ever, Jacob faced a dramatic choice. Should he confront his past head-on or refocus on the scene unfolding before him? The flickering light of resolution began to dim as his personal demons clawed back to the surface, demanding attention. As Jacob turned, the weight of inevitable confrontation pressed down on him. Every choice bore the potential for revelation, change, and perhaps betrayal. How would he navigate this next split in the road? Jacob's heart raced, his decision hanging delicately in the balance. The tension in the air felt electric as he turned to face the newcomer, each breath he took strained with memories he'd long buried. The familiar figure stood imposing in the crowd, an unsettling reminder of self-doubt and failure, the very shadows Jacob thought he'd left behind. What are you doing here? He managed, though the words seemed inadequate. The man's presence felt like a storm cloud, brooding and dark over Jacob's fragile moment of clarity. He could feel the eyes of the crowd drifting back and forth between him and the intruder, their curiosity mingling with rising anxiety. I'm here to see history repeat itself, I suppose, the man responded with a smugness that cut deeper than Jacob anticipated. You've always been good at playing the hero, haven't you? But tell me, how many times have you actually saved anyone? The aggressor in front of him shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing the gravity of the confrontation unfolding rather than the resolution Jacob had sought. Jacob's internal battle rekindled, and the air thickened around him, suffocating his previously liberating resolve. Enough, Jacob said, forcing a steely edge into his voice. This isn't about me. It's about him. He gestured towards the man who had been on the verge of violence only moments before. He deserves to write his own story. But you still let your past control you, Jake, the man shot back, his tone dripping with disdain. Back in the day, you couldn't even confront your own failures, the ones I delivered. You're nothing but an idealist desperate for redemption. A rush of indignation surged within Jacob. The truth hit too close to home, and he felt the hot sting of shame creep up his neck. Doubt threatened to drown him once again, but he wrestled back against the tide. "You think your words can shake me?" he asked, surprising even himself with the steadiness of his voice. "You can't have that power anymore." The aggressor took a hesitant step back, confusion mixed with a semblance of understanding flickering across his face. Jacob used that pause, trying to recapture the focus and energy of the crowd. He had felt himself transforming into a figure of influence, someone capable not just of understanding others but of guiding them towards change, an unexpected sense of agency rising within him. "I'm not just talking to him," Jacob pressed on, his gaze moving through the crowd. "These are stories we all share. Each one of us carries the weight of our past. It can either push us down or drive us to rise. What I've learned is that those who fail often have the most to teach. Change isn't simple, it's messy, complicated, and at times, it's terrifying." As he spoke, he could see a shift in the aggressor's demeanor, confusion yielding to curiosity. The once hostile figure edged back into uncertainty, perhaps yearning for that insight Jacob had just glimpsed in himself. Empathy swelled in the collective, eyes widening, breaths holding, as they began to share this pivotal moment, a threshold to growth. But before the aggressor could react, the familiar figure scoffed. "He'll never change, Jake. Not while you're trying to save him from his own demons. And neither will you." Anger simmered beneath Jacob's skin, yet, instead of flaring, he turned inward, probing at the tender spot where self-doubt lay intertwined with the strength he sought to embrace. What was it about the past that still held him captive? That question danced dangerously close to unearthing fears he had barely started to confront. "I'm not your pawn anymore," Jacob asserted, directing his focus back toward the crowd. "I know my worth doesn't hinge on your approval, and I refuse to play out this narrative you've crafted for me. Tomorrow is our chance to redefine ourselves, not just me but each one of us." The man scoffed again, a mocking laugh that threw another jet of cold water on Jacob's moment. "Good luck with that. You'll need it." That bitter closing remark hung in the air thicker than the gathering fog, amplifying Jacob's resolve. The words reached deep into his psyche, sparking a fire for action beneath the emotional avalanche of lingering failure. He must confront this now, not just for himself but as a lesson for the one who had been on the brink of aggression. The moment lay heavily on Jacob, pregnant with the open choices that awaited, confronting the echo of his past or embracing the growth emerging from the shadows. But what he didn't know was how his next decision could quite possibly unlock a hidden potential he had yet to discover. Jacob braced himself. Could he face the past without crumbling? Could he truly carve out a new pathway not just for himself but for the man caught in a storm of his own making? As he prepared to respond, two roads stretched ahead, one leading to confrontation, the other to revelation. With the crowd holding its collective breath, Jacob sensed that now was the moment to leap. How would he navigate the next turn he had set in motion? In that charged moment, Jacob's thoughts raced through a labyrinth of doubts and desires. The shadows of his past were swirling fiercely, and for the first time, he grasped that confronting them might ignite a spark of change rather than extinguish his spirit. With the aggressor standing there, Jacob felt the weight of every missed opportunity settle heavily on his shoulders. But this wasn't just about self-preservation, it was about reclaiming power. His gaze locked momentarily with the aggressor's, and Jacob found an unexpected flicker of vulnerability there, an echo of himself, perhaps, in a past he longed to escape. It was a revelation. Even those who seemed irredeemable carried wounds unseen by the world. It was time he turned the mirror back on himself, understanding that growth flourished in shared struggles. "Listen," Jacob began, his voice firm yet inviting, "we're here at the precipice of our stories. Your past doesn't have to bind you. It can serve as a lesson, a springboard to bounce from instead of a weight to drown under." The aggressor's expression faltered, and for that brief moment, Jacob sensed a brief crack in his facade, a glimmer of doubt breaking through the bravado. Help doesn't mean saving someone, it means guiding them to find their own strength. Don't let your narrative define you. I once let others dictate my story too, and it led to more pain than I ever imagined possible. A ripple of murmurs slithered through the crowd, tightening the bond of uncertainty. Each breath felt weighted by the collective tension yet charged with possibility. Jacob pressed forward, feeling the momentum shift. What if I told you that real heroes are not immune to failure? What if I told you they wear their scars boldly and use them as armor? His heart raced with every word, fueled by a growing conviction. I may have made mistakes, but I refuse to be defined by them. The aggressor began to scowl, but Jacob pressed on, fueled by a fire that had reignited deep within him. Instead of clinging to old narratives, we can craft new ones not shaped by fear. Imagine if we both committed to growing from our pasts, no longer shackled by bitterness or regret. Together, we could be agents of change. Suddenly, a memory surged in Jacob's mind, a time when he had felt more than just a pawn. A vivid image of a community member, previously disturbed and chaotic, stepping forward to help others. It lit a fire inside him. That could be them. A new potential formed beyond preconceived identities. As he spoke, he observed the shifting expressions in the crowd. They were hungry for more than just empty words, craving authenticity. Within the space of that charged encounter, hope began to fracture the walls of despair that ensnared so many. I can't make you walk away from your past, Jacob declared, channeling that hope. But I can show you how to rise from it. The transformation starts when you embrace the truth of who you really are, not who you've been told you are. The aggressor's face transformed momentarily, a mixture of anger and curiosity swirling as if he were peering through a clouded lens for the first time. What if you're wrong? He spat, trying to retreat to his shield of hostility. But beneath that bravado, Jacob detected the tremble of uncertainty. Then we try again, Jacob replied, until we uncover our truth. There is strength and vulnerability in admitting the need for change. If we cannot transform, how can we expect others to? With those words hanging in the air, he felt the collective energy of the group shift decisively. A realization wedged its way into the aggressor's demeanor, chipping away at the armor he had forged over years of resentment and rage. But just as the moment seemed ripe for growth, the familiar figure stepped forward defiantly, a thunderstorm in the sunlit space Jacob had worked to illuminate. You think words can touch him? Don't kid yourself, Jake. What you're doing is futile. The tension ratcheted up again, evoking a wave of emotions in the crowd. Jacob braced himself, knowing this was the juncture that could either spiral into conflict or ignite an unforeseen transformation. But he refused to falter. I'll take that chance. It's worth it if there's even a sliver of hope for you, for him, for me. And as he exchanged a final glance with the aggressor, Jacob felt more ready than ever to face not just the past, but the emergence of his own unexplored potential. How far could that courage take him? Would the words he'd chosen to unlock the deepest fears initiate the overdue change? Jacob's heart hammered in anticipation. Was he on the brink of unveiling a new truth, or would the confrontation dissolve into the past he was so determined to escape? He inhaled deeply, knowing that the next step could define not only himself but the man he had once engaged with in conflict. Was it time to push further or retreat? The choice loomed. The crowd's murmur swelled, charged with a cocktail of disbelief and anticipation. Jacob steeled himself, glancing quickly at the familiar figure who had cast doubt on his intentions. This was a moment of clarity, a poignant crossroads where fear and opportunity split. With every second, the perception of him would cascade into eternity. Breathing deeply, he let the gravity of the confrontation pull him into the present. Futile? He echoed with conviction, pushing back against the dismissive remarks with a steady gaze. What's futile is letting fear keep us shackled in darkness. Each of us stands where we are for a reason, and that reason can become our launchpad or our prison. It's our choice. The aggressor's eyes darted between Jacob's unwavering expression and the crowd, now visibly inching closer, captivated. A moment hung in the air, dense with questions. Was he truly willing to plunge into emotional depths where others feared to tread? Or was this an exercise in self-deception, Jacob beckoned the aggressor with an outstretched hand, not as a display of submission but an invitation for mutual engagement. "Step forward, you don't have to wrestle with your pain alone. I want to show you what I found on the other side of my fears. It's as terrifying as it is liberating." A volatility pulsed within that moment, and Jacob experienced the bittersweet allure of connection. Acceptance could take root in this fear-laden exchange if only he continued to reach out beyond the realm of expectations. The aggressor smirked, a defiant mask over a tumultuous heart, but Jacob sensed a tremor in that bravado. It resonated as an internal battle, a reflection against the barriers Jacob had once faced. The crowd's murmurs shifted, a swell of empathy blossoming as they found threads of their own stories woven into Jacob's. They, too, stood on thresholds of transformation, and it took one person's courage to turn the tide. Enveloped by this newfound sense of belonging, Jacob grasped the significance of their smiles, their wide eyes. His stand was beyond just himself, it resonated across the anguish in others. "How will we ever know if we don't try?" he pressed, the rhetoric piercing through the veil of room hesitance. "We are all the authors of our own stories, capable of recreating them if we choose to pen a new narrative." The aggressor hesitated, shadows of vulnerability crossing his face. Jacob knew this moment was pivotal, where doubt and regret collided, ambition flickered. He saw the waning hostility in the man's eyes and felt a surge of determination flooding through him. Without thinking, he stepped closer, aware of the risk. He now danced on the edge of rawness. "I see you. And I see the struggle. I feel the desire to escape your own pain. Forgive yourself, just as I'm learning to forgive me." With those words, the air thickened, pregnant with burgeoning change and uncertainty. The familiar figure, still pressing from the periphery, laughed derisively, fueling Jacob's resolve. Here lay the ultimate conflict. Could words penetrate enough to shatter the layers of resentment built over years of unforgivable pasts? "Watch closely," Jacob declared, needing to forge a path out of doubt by burning light onto the shadows. "If I can rise despite my scars, so can he, they, we. None are beyond redemption." It felt monumental, as if he had opened a gateway to liberation. But as he gazed into the aggressor's eyes, he realized the battle wasn't just external. It germinated within, ripe with the same walls of bitterness he himself had once harbored. This was about healing jointly. The vulnerability was mutual. The aggressor shifted uneasily. Doubt twisted and knotted his features, but there remained a fire beneath that simmered just out of reach of comprehension. Jacob seized the moment, knowing they teetered on the brink of epitome and collapse. Suddenly, a voice pierced the growing intensity again, a plea wrapped in contempt. "This is a waste of time, Jacob. You think exposing yourself will fix this?" Each heartbeat crescendoed into the noise of the onlookers, each question posed a razor edge against his resolve. "I don't expect a miracle," Jacob replied with unwavering clarity. "But if we can dare to bare our souls, even if just once, we might unearth something: solidarity, strength, perhaps even a future free of chains." Each word was another brick laid toward a bridge, yet Jacob knew that standing there with unresolved fears was only half the battle. Now he must confront his own apprehensions about what it truly meant to grow and change. As the aggressor cast a sidelong glance, a moment felt like an eternity. Where would this vulnerable connection lead? Could he find the words to shift their destinies, or would it push both men towards more profound divides? "Let us take this leap together," Jacob whispered firmly, standing at the precipice of transformation. The silence enveloped them, taut with tension. Would the aggressor accept the challenge, or would the weight of fear pull them back into the shadows? The tension in the air began to lift. Jacob stood steadfast, feeling the energy of the crowd shift as all eyes focused on the man who had once stood ready to unleash violence. He took a deep breath, sensing that this was a consequential moment not just for himself and the aggressor, but for everyone witnessing this dance of vulnerability and transformation. "Listen," Jacob said again, his voice low but inclusive. "It's time for us all to come together to acknowledge the pain, the mistakes, and the way forward." He took a bold step toward the aggressor, his heart pounding, but fierce determination steadied him. I felt the weight of my past cling to me like a second skin, suffocating my opportunity to rise. But I discovered that acknowledging that past is not weakness, it is the basis for true growth. The aggressor's stance faltered, confusion rippling across his features, like a storm cloud breaking apart under the sun. Jacob pushed on, feeling the transformation unfolding not just within him, but around them all. You've experienced pain, just like I have. You don't have to carry that burden alone. In fact, I am here to show you that healing starts by embracing our stories. Jacob was surprised to witness his own resolve buoying the aggressor's spirit. There was a glimmer of recognition in the man's eyes, as if the seed of understanding had been planted within. Take the first step with me, Jacob continued, stretching out his hand, not as a display of submission, but as an offer of solidarity. Life doesn't have to be defined by aggression or fear. Imagine if we united our stories, what kind of legacy would we leave for the ones coming after us? A breathless moment crystallized the tension hanging over them. Jacob's mind raced back to the haunting echoes of his tarnished past, his failures crashing like waves against his spirit. But now, here he stood, standing firm not only for this man but also for the redemption he longed for himself. The hand extended toward the aggressor began to tremble. What if I let go? The man voiced, the tremor vibrating through the air. What if I can't? Each word carried doubt, but beneath it lingered a desperate hope, a flicker igniting within. Then we'll face that together, Jacob assured him, the truth and sincerity in his eyes growing brighter. It's about taking that gamble, a risk worth more than preserving the weight of one's past. In an unexpected moment, the aggressor's shoulders sagged, his fists relaxing. With each muscle that they released, the hardened facade cracked to reveal vulnerability beneath. The weight of expectation balanced precariously on the line of possibility. Can I actually do it? He asked, his voice softer, less abrasive, unearthing the human beneath the anger. The crowd held its breath, the power of hope hanging in the air. Yes, Jacob said, unwavering. You can. I can. We all can. And then, as if buoyed by some unseen force, the aggressor stepped closer to Jacob, drawn in by an invisible thread connecting their two worlds. A shuddering breath escaped his lips. I don't want to be this man anymore. A ripple of collective exhale passed through the onlooking crowd, realization dawning. They were witnessing more than just two men confronting their pasts, they were observing the birth of a new narrative. I'm here too, you know, the hooded man said softly, revealing his own struggle beneath the bravado. I thought I could protect others by standing in silence, but we all carry stories that need amplification. With each of us taking these steps, Jacob interjected, the lighting in his eyes emboldened, we become change agents in our lives, crafting futures defined by resilience, rather than fear. Let us walk forward from this ledge together, and we'll find the new paths emerging from our pasts. In an emotional crescendo, Jacob felt the winds of transformation envelop his spirit. Together, they created a force powerful enough to sweep through doubts and fears, insisting that everyone in that space recognize their interwoven narratives. They forged ahead, hand in hand, stepping forward into a future untainted by yesterday's judgments. This was an extraordinary transformation, the evolution of Jacob from an individual shrouded in shame, greed, and self-loathing to one who stood confidently beside others, illuminating paths of possibility rather than littering them with hatred. In those moments, he realized that it wasn't just about walking alone, it was about walking together toward shared hope. Jacob had finally reclaimed his connection to humanity and established a bond forged in the fires of adversity. His heart soared as he felt empowered, not just for himself, but as a beacon for all those around him. As the last words of encouragement faded into the night, he recognized his past not as a prison but as the fertile soil from which his rebirth thrived. In their shared struggle, Jacob found healing and belonging. Let this be your call to action. You need to subscribe now to our channel to discover transformative tales of struggle and redemption just like Jacob's. Leave a like now to ensure these stories continue to resonate and show your support for those facing similar personal battles. Comment below with your thoughts and theories on Jacob's inspiring conclusion. What resonates with you, And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to explore the power of transformation. Show your commitment to uplifting stories of personal growth. Support us as we embark on this powerful journey together.